worked the overnight shift at a convenience store near a gas station in rural Oklahoma, in a very small town where almost nothing happens after 10 p.m. At the time this happened, I had been at that job for a few months, always taking the midnight to 6 a.m. shift. Normally, it's pretty quiet. Most of the time I'm alone, just organizing shelves, cleaning the counter, or using my phone during the slower moments. The store has several very visible cameras, one in each corner of the ceiling, covering almost everything. The register, aisles, entrance, even part of the parking lot. The manager always emphasizes that they're essential, especially since we work alone. So I was already used to knowing exactly where each camera covered. That night, around 2:30 a.m., there hadn't been anyone in the store for quite a while. Business had been very slow, just a few drivers stopping for gas and leaving quickly. I was behind the counter working on the system when I heard the door open, the usual beep that goes off when someone enters. I looked up automatically, expecting to see a normal customer, but the way the guy walked in immediately caught my attention. He didn't go straight to any shelf or to the register. He stopped right after the door, slightly raised his head, and looked directly at the cameras. I watched him for a few seconds, trying to figure out if it was just coincidence, but it didn't seem like it. He looked from one corner of the ceiling to the other, like he was identifying exactly where each camera was positioned. It wasn't a quick glance from someone curious, it was calculated. That already made me a bit uncomfortable, so I straightened up behind the counter and asked if he needed anything. He slowly turned his face toward me, as if he had finished checking everything before speaking to me. He stepped a bit closer to the register but didn't reach the counter. He stopped about 1.5 meters away, looking at me with a neutral expression that was hard to read. The first thing he said was, "Can you turn off the cameras for just a minute?" His tone wasn't aggressive and it didn't sound like a joke. It was direct, like a normal request. At first I thought I had misheard, so I just stared at him for a second. He didn't look away. He just repeated the same way. "Just 1 minute." Right then I felt a strong discomfort. The kind you can't really explain, but you know something is wrong. I responded almost automatically that I couldn't do that. That the cameras were controlled by the system and I didn't have access to turn anything off. That was true. But even if it weren't, I wouldn't have turned them off. He kept looking at me for a few more seconds like he was evaluating my answer, and then gave a slight smile. It wasn't a normal smile, very small, almost expressionless, just enough to slightly change his face. Without saying anything else at that moment, he started walking around the store. But the way he moved wasn't normal. He didn't really look at the products, didn't pick anything up, didn't seem interested in buying anything. What he did was move slowly around, always positioning himself in spots where I knew the cameras didn't fully capture. They were small blind spots, areas between one camera and another. I knew those spots existed, but I had never paid much attention until I saw someone using them on purpose. I stayed behind the counter, watching him as he moved around the store. The more I paid attention, the clearer it became that this wasn't random. He knew exactly where to stand, how to angle his body, where to position himself so he wouldn't appear fully on any camera. At times, he even adjusted his position by a few inches, like he was testing the limits of the camera's field of view. That started making me tense in a different way, because it wasn't just someone strange, it was someone who seemed to have thought about this before. At one point, he stopped near one of the side shelves, picked up a random item just to pretend, but his body was positioned so that half of him was out of the camera's view. He quickly glanced upward as if confirming that, then put the item back without really looking at it. I started feeling that constant alertness, like I was waiting for him to do something at any moment. My mind was already going through options like pressing an emergency button or calling someone, but at the same time I didn't want to overreact without being sure. After a few minutes of moving like that, he walked back toward the register. He stopped almost in the same spot as before, keeping that distance that wasn't too close or too far. He looked at me for a few seconds like he was waiting for something. I was fully alert by then, not taking my eyes off him, trying to maintain a normal posture but ready to react if needed. That's when he spoke again with the same calm tone. "That's fine, I can wait outside." That didn't make sense at the time, not the way he said it. It wasn't a direct threat, but it didn't sound harmless either. He gave that same small smile, turned his back, and started walking toward the door. I watched him the entire time. When he opened the door and stepped out, the beep echoed again in the quiet store. I waited a few seconds trying to process what had just happened, then went to the camera monitor behind the counter. I looked directly at the screen showing the outdoor cameras, expecting to see him leaving or getting into a car. But he wasn't in any of the angles. I frowned and started switching between cameras, trying to find exactly where he had gone. That's when I remembered that the parking lot coverage wasn't complete. There was a spot to the right, near a darker area, where the lighting didn't reach properly and the camera only partially covered it. I focused on that image, trying to adjust my eyes to see better. And that's when I saw him. He was there, standing, outside the direct reach of the camera, but still visible enough because of the store's indirect light. Standing still, looking straight inside. He wasn't using his phone, wasn't looking around, just standing there, facing the entrance. That made my stomach tighten immediately because now there was no doubt. He hadn't left. He was waiting, and from the looks of it, waiting for the exact moment when he wouldn't be seen. I felt a cold wave go through my body at that moment. It wasn't just discomfort anymore, it was real fear, because now there was no doubt about what he wanted. He didn't leave by accident. He didn't go away. He chose to stay exactly where he knew he wasn't being recorded. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the monitor, waiting to see if he would move, but he remained completely still, looking inside the store. It was like he was waiting for something to change inside, and the only thing that made sense was what he had asked before. I quickly looked around the store just to confirm that there was no one else inside. Empty, silent, I was alone. That made me even more tense because there was no one to share the situation with, no one to ask for help right then. I started thinking about what to do. Calling the police seemed like an option, but at the same time I hadn't done it yet because technically he hadn't done anything. He was just standing outside. But the feeling that it could escalate at any moment wouldn't leave me. I stayed there for a few minutes, looking back and forth between the monitor and the store door, trying to decide what to do. My mind kept going between maybe he'll leave and this could go very wrong. I even picked up the store phone a few times, thinking about calling the police, but I always hesitated before dialing. Meanwhile, he stayed out there in the same position, showing no sign of leaving. That made me more and more nervous because it wasn't normal behavior for someone just passing by. Then I had a simple idea that made sense at the moment. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, pointing it directly at the glass door, illuminating as much as possible outside. At the same time, I turned on every light I could inside the store, including the ones that are usually off at that hour. The idea was to make the environment as bright as possible, eliminate any shadows that could favor him. While I did that, I kept looking through the glass, trying to see a reaction. And for the first time since he had stepped outside, he moved. He took a few steps back, still outside the direct camera range, like he was recalculating his position. He didn't look startled or surprised, just adjusting. That made me even more uneasy, because it wasn't a normal reaction from someone caught off guard. He didn't run, he didn't leave. He just moved back enough to stay within that limit where he wasn't fully visible. I kept the flashlight pointed and stayed behind the counter, trying not to show nervousness but completely tense inside. After a few seconds like that, he simply turned his body sideways and started walking away, slowly, toward the darkness of the parking lot. I followed him with my eyes until I couldn't see anything anymore. I stood there for a while, not moving, waiting for him to come back or appear somewhere else. But he didn't. Even so, I couldn't relax. Because the feeling that stayed with me was that he didn't leave because he gave up. He left because it wasn't the right moment anymore. And since that night, I've never felt comfortable working alone on that shift again. Story 2. I was working the overnight shift at a gas station on a highway that's very busy during the day, but completely empty at night, in rural Texas, near a long stretch of road that cuts through farms and open areas. It was the kind of place where truck drivers stop during the day, but overnight the traffic drops a lot. I worked from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., almost always alone. There were cameras at the register and at the pumps, but the lot was too large to be covered perfectly. That night, around 3 a.m., I was already halfway through my shift, doing the usual, cleaning the counter and checking stock, trying to stay busy. That's when I looked through the front window and noticed a truck parked at one of the farther pumps. At first, I didn't think anything of it. That happens all the time. Truck drivers stop, rest for a bit, sometimes even take a nap before continuing their trip. But as time went on, I started noticing that it wasn't moving. I checked the clock a few times and the truck was still exactly in the same spot. After about 40 minutes, it no longer felt like a normal stop. That's when I started paying closer attention. I began observing the truck more carefully, still from inside the store. The first thing that caught my attention was that the passenger side door was open. Not completely wide open, but enough to keep the interior light on, illuminating part of the cabin. That wasn't common, especially after that much time. Normally, if someone is resting, everything stays closed. I tried to see if there was anyone inside, but from where I was, I could only make out the light and some shadows. Even so, I waited a little longer before doing anything. Part of me thought maybe the driver was nearby, using the restroom or walking around. But time kept passing, and no one showed up. The road was completely empty at that moment, and so was the station. No other cars pulled in, no unusual movement. That light inside the truck started bothering me more than it should have, because it was the only visible sign of activity out there. After a few more minutes of watching, I decided I needed to check it out up close. It didn't feel right to leave it like that, especially if someone needed help. I was the only one there to notice. I stepped out from behind the counter, grabbed the station key out of habit, and walked to the front door. Before going outside, I quickly checked the camera monitor to make sure no one else was on the lot. Everything was empty, just the truck at the far pump. As soon as I opened the door, I felt the warm night air, that dry heat typical of the area even at that hour. The silence outside felt different, heavier, without the usual background noise from the highway. I started walking toward the truck slower than usual, paying attention to any sound. As I got closer, the cabin light became brighter, illuminating the inside more clearly. But I still couldn't see anyone in there. When I got closer, I started noticing details on the ground that I couldn't see from afar. Near the side of the truck, there were marks on the pavement like something had been dragged. They weren't very deep, but visible enough to stand out under the cabin light. They seemed to go from the back of the truck toward the open door. That immediately put me more on alert, because it wasn't something you normally see during a regular stop. I paused for a moment, looking at those marks, trying to figure out what could have caused them. That's when I heard a faint sound coming from the back of the truck. It wasn't loud, more like a muffled movement, something shifting inside. I slowly turned my head toward the sound, feeling my body tense up. I couldn't see anything directly from where I stood, just the long side of the truck and the dark area behind it. But I knew it had come from there. I stood still for a few seconds, trying to hear it again, but the silence returned immediately. That made me even more tense because it felt like the sound had stopped the moment I noticed it. I took a few more steps toward the cabin, trying to stay calm, but already feeling like maybe I shouldn't be that close. I looked again at the open door, trying to see if someone was in the passenger seat, but there was still no one visible. The interior light made it clear enough for me to see that no one was sitting there. Then, without any warning, the passenger door slammed shut. It wasn't a gentle close, it was a sharp, fast impact, like someone had pulled it from the inside. The sound echoed through the quiet station and made me step back immediately, more out of reflex than anything else. My heart started racing instantly, and I stared at the cabin, trying to understand what had just happened, because I was absolutely certain of one thing. There had been no one visible there just seconds before. Before I could react or take another step, the truck started. It was immediate, like it had been ready to go. The engine roared to life and the vehicle began moving almost at the same time. I stepped back again, quickly putting distance between myself and the truck, still trying to process what was happening. There had been no warning, no sound of someone getting into the cabin, nothing. Just the door slamming, and the truck pulling away right after. It left the pump at high speed, turning toward the exit of the station without even slowing down properly. I stood there for a few seconds, watching as it disappeared into the dark road. I couldn't see the driver, not even when it passed through a brighter patch of light. It all happened too fast. After it was gone, the silence returned, heavier than before. I looked back down at the ground, at the marks I had seen earlier. And in that moment, the only thing that made sense to me was that someone had been back there. And that person had waited for the exact moment I got close and to leave. Story 3. I started working at a 24-hour gas station in a small town in rural Virginia, not far from Roanoke. It was my first job after moving there, so I was still adjusting to everything, the routine, the place, the people. I took the overnight shift almost without thinking, because it paid a little better and, according to the manager, it was quieter. My hours were from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and I was usually completely alone. The store had cameras, but like many places like that, they didn't cover everything perfectly. I hadn't told anyone outside of work exactly what my schedule was yet, and I hadn't made any friends in town. On the first 2 nights, everything was pretty normal. Very little movement. A few customers coming in and out quickly, nothing unusual. I was even starting to get used to the constant silence of that shift. But on the 3rd night, around 2:17 a.m., I remember exactly because after that I started paying attention to the time. The store door opened, and a man walked in. He didn't seem rushed or lost. He just walked in, looked around calmly, and then looked straight at me behind the counter. He approached slowly, without picking anything up from the shelves, just walking directly to the counter. He stopped at a normal distance, not too close, not too far, and looked at me for a second before speaking. The first thing he said caught me completely off guard. "You're always alone at this hour, right?" He said it like it was a casual comment, almost like talking about the weather. But it made me immediately uncomfortable, because it's not something someone normally says to an employee they just met. I tried to respond neutrally, saying something vague like how the overnight shift is usually quieter. I didn't confirm or deny it directly. He nodded slightly as if he already knew the answer, and stood there for a few more seconds without saying anything. Then he grabbed a bottle of water near the register, placed it on the counter, and paid normally. Nothing out of the ordinary at that moment. But while I was ringing him up, I noticed he didn't look away. Not in an aggressive way, but constant. Observing more than interacting. After he left, I was left with that slight feeling of discomfort, but I tried to ignore it. I thought it might have just been a strange comment, nothing more. But the next night, at practically the same time, 2:17 again, he came back. This time, I noticed even before he entered because I had started checking the clock more often without realizing it. When the door opened, I already knew who it was. He walked in the same calm way, looking around before going to the counter. He didn't say anything different this time. He picked up another simple item, paid, stood there for a few seconds, and left. But the behavior was the same. More observing than anything else. And the time, exactly the same. That started bothering me more because it didn't feel like a coincidence. From that point on, I started paying attention, and in the following nights, he kept showing up at the exact same minute. It never changed. It was always 2:17 a.m. After the 4th time that happened, I was no longer comfortable. It wasn't just the repeated timing, it was everything combined. The way he spoke little, the way he observed more than interacted, and especially that first sentence he had said. I started paying closer attention to the cameras, to the corners of the store, to the doors. I began keeping the back door locked at all times, checking it more than once during my shift. Even so, the feeling of being watched didn't go away. There was one night when he stayed inside the store a bit longer. He didn't do anything specific, just walked slowly between the aisles like he was passing time, but always within my line of sight. I noticed that at times he would discreetly look toward areas I knew weren't fully covered by the cameras. That made me even more tense because it didn't seem random. It felt like he was learning the space. The next night, I was already more alert from the beginning of my shift. I kept checking the clock more often, almost waiting for the time. As 2:17 approached, I felt my body tense up without realizing it. But this time, the door didn't open. The minute passed and nothing happened. That confused me for a moment because I had been expecting him. Part of me even felt a slight relief, but at the same time, there was that strange feeling that something wasn't right. That's when I looked toward the front windows of the store. And I saw him outside, standing, not close to the door, but farther away in an area where the lighting wasn't as strong. He was standing there, looking inside. He wasn't trying to come in, wasn't waving, nothing. Just watching. That made my stomach tighten immediately because until then he had always come inside. It was the first time he stayed outside like that. I stared at him for a few seconds, trying to understand what it meant. My first instinct was to ignore it and stay behind the counter, but I couldn't. His presence outside, doing nothing, felt worse than when he came in. I tried to observe better, but the lighting didn't help much. I could only see his silhouette standing there facing the store. No movement, no gestures, just presence, and that made me more and more nervous. Then I heard a sound coming from the back of the store. It was faint, but clear enough for me to notice immediately. Something like someone trying to turn the handle of the back door. My whole body froze for a second. I slowly turned my head toward the hallway leading back there, feeling my heart start racing in a way I couldn't control. The sound came again. Someone trying to open the door. At that moment, I felt panic rise fully. It wasn't a vague feeling anymore, it was real. Someone was trying to get in through the back while he was outside. My first instinct was to stay where I was, just listening. The sound of the handle came again. This time a bit more insistent, like whoever was on the other side was testing whether the door would give. I took a slow step back behind the counter, trying to stay out of the direct line of the windows while I looked forward again. And he was still there, standing, watching. That's when everything clicked in a way that made it even more terrifying. He knew the time. He knew I was alone, and now he was outside while someone else was trying to get in through the back. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't just some random person passing by. It had been planned. I grabbed the phone with a trembling hand and called the police without taking my eyes off the back door. The sound stopped suddenly, as if whoever was there had noticed something. I stayed on the line, speaking quietly to the operator, trying to quickly explain what was happening while keeping my eyes shifting between the back door and the front of the store. My hands were shaking and I had to steady myself against the counter to keep my balance. I said that someone was trying to get in through the back and that there was a man standing outside watching. While I was talking, I looked again toward the window, and he was gone. That gave me an immediate shock because it had only been a few seconds. I tried to scan the area, moving slightly to the side of the store to get a better angle, but I didn't see anyone. No sign of movement. At the same time, the back door went completely silent. No more attempts, no more sounds. It was like both things had stopped at the exact same moment. I stayed on the line with the police until they arrived, which took a few minutes but felt much longer. They checked the area but didn't find anyone. After that night, I never saw that man again. But what stayed with me the most wasn't just what happened. It was the certainty that he knew exactly when I would be vulnerable, and that for some reason on that specific night, he decided to test it. Story 4. I worked the overnight shift at a gas station in rural Illinois, in a small town where practically nothing happens after midnight. It was one of those stations with an attached convenience store, and during my shift I was completely alone. At that time I was already used to the routine, few people coming in, long stretches of silence just organizing things and waiting for the shift to pass. The cameras covered the inside of the store well, and the register system was fully automated so any activity would be recorded. That night around 3 a.m., business had completely died down. I had already started organizing the register, counting the money, separating bills, checking the system records. The store was completely empty and I knew that clearly because I had looked around before starting. The door hadn't opened in a while, and there were no cars in the lot. It was just me in there, with that constant silence you only notice when there's truly no one else around. While I was organizing the money, the register system made a sound. That standard beep when an item is scanned. Automatically, I looked at the screen, thinking maybe I had accidentally pressed a key without realizing it. But I wasn't holding anything and I wasn't touching the scanner. Even so, a sale appeared in the system. A simple item, as if someone had scanned a product. That immediately made me frown because it didn't make any sense. I looked around the store expecting to see someone near the register, but there was no one. No customers, no movement. The door hadn't made the opening sound and I would have heard it if it had. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the system, trying to figure out if it could be some kind of error. But the record was there, complete, just like a normal purchase. That gave me a strange feeling because it wasn't just any bug. It felt like a real action with no one there to do it. I tried to ignore it for a moment, thinking it could just be a system glitch, but it didn't seem like something common. I checked the register history to look closer, and the entry was there with an exact timestamp just like any other sale. No obvious inconsistency, and still no one in the store. I lifted my gaze and looked again down the aisles, scanning from side to side as if someone might suddenly appear. But everything remained empty and silent. Then just a few seconds later, the door sensor went off, that distinct sound when someone passes through the entrance. I looked up immediately, expecting to see the door opening, but it didn't move. It stayed completely closed. The sound had been real, I had no doubt, but there was no movement at all. That gave me immediate discomfort because it was two things in a row without explanation. First the register entry, now the door sensor, and still no one inside. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the door, waiting for any movement. Nothing. The handle didn't move, the door didn't open. The silence returned right after the sound, as if nothing had happened. I could feel that discomfort growing, because it no longer felt like coincidence. I took a few slow steps forward from behind the counter, trying to get a bit closer to the entrance without fully leaving my position. When I got closer to the glass, I looked outside. The station lights only reached part of the lot, leaving a darker area beyond. And it was there, exactly at that boundary between light and darkness, that I saw someone, a person standing still, completely motionless just outside the direct light. I couldn't see their face or details of their clothes, just the silhouette. But it was clear they were looking inside. At that moment, I felt a cold sensation run through my entire body. It wasn't just that someone was out there. It was the way they were standing. Not moving, not stepping forward, not trying to come in, just watching. I stared for a few seconds too, trying to figure out if it was really someone or just a shadow, some trick of the light, but it wasn't. I could make out the shape of the body, the position of the head. It was a real person. I instinctively took a step back, moving closer to the counter again, without taking my eyes off the door. My mind started connecting things. The register entry, the door sensor, and now someone standing out there. It started to feel connected in a way I didn't like that person was waiting for some kind of confirmation before coming in. And that feeling made me more tense than anything else. I kept watching that silhouette for a few more seconds, trying to see if they would move closer or do anything. But they didn't. They stayed exactly where they were, as if waiting for something specific to happen. That made me even more uncomfortable, because it wasn't normal behavior for someone who just wanted to come in and buy something. I thought about saying something, even just a "Can I help you?" But the truth was, I didn't want to draw attention. I just wanted that person to leave. Then the register system beeped again. Another scan. I immediately looked at the screen and another item had been registered. This time different from the first, but in the same way, as if someone had scanned it. My heart started racing because it was happening while I was looking at the door, without touching anything. I slowly lifted my gaze, and the person outside was still there, standing, as if they were waiting for that. I felt a tight pressure in my chest at that moment, because now it definitely didn't feel like coincidence anymore. It felt like the person outside was synchronized with what was happening inside the store. I looked back at the register, trying to figure out if there was some pattern, something I was missing. But before I could think further, the door sensor went off again. The same sound as before, loud enough to echo in that silence. I immediately looked at the entrance, and this time the door moved slightly. It didn't open completely, but it shifted just a bit, like someone had lightly pushed it or tested it. My body froze for a second. The silhouette was still outside, but now it seemed a little closer to the lit area. Still without details, still without a visible face, but closer than before. And the feeling I had was very clear. It was waiting for the right moment to come in. I didn't wait any longer to see what would happen. My body reacted before my mind did. I went straight to the phone behind the counter and dialed the police with a trembling hand, without taking my eyes off the door. While it rang, I could still hear the faint sound of the door being pushed from time to time, like someone testing if it would open completely. My breathing was fast and I could feel my heart pounding hard in my chest. As I spoke to the operator, quickly explaining what was happening, I looked outside again, and the person had moved away. They didn't run, didn't suddenly disappear. They just weren't there anymore. I tried to see beyond the light, but I couldn't spot anything. At the same time, the register system went completely silent. No new entries. The door sensor also stopped. It was like everything had stopped at once. The police arrived a few minutes later and checked the area, but found no one. They reviewed the cameras with me, and that's when it got even stranger. The system had recorded the sales, but there was no one in the footage making them. After that night, I never trusted the silence of those overnight shifts the same way again, because the feeling that stayed with me was that someone knew exactly how the system worked and was waiting for the right confirmation to come in. Story 5. I was working the overnight shift at a convenience store on a very isolated road in rural New Mexico, one of those places where you can drive for miles without seeing anything but dirt, power lines, and a few distant buildings. The station was more of a stop for travelers, but during the night the traffic dropped a lot. I was alone almost the entire time, just with the cameras and the constant silence of the place. I was already used to it, so it normally didn't bother me. That night around 2 a.m., I noticed a car slowly pulling into the lot and parking in one of the spaces closest to the store, but without going to the pumps. That immediately caught my attention, because people who stop there usually either get gas or go straight inside. The car stayed on. I could tell by the slight vibration and the low sound of the engine. I waited a few seconds thinking the person would get out, but no one did. It just stayed there. I kept glancing over from time to time, trying not to stare directly so it wouldn't seem obvious, but it had already caught my attention. The car remained in the same spot, engine running, with no visible movement inside. The lighting at the station wasn't strong enough for me to see clear details of the interior, but I could make out the silhouette of someone sitting in the driver's seat. And that person wasn't doing anything. Not using a phone, not adjusting their position, not appearing distracted, just sitting there. Minutes went by and it started bothering me more than it should have. I checked the time a few times and before I realized it, almost half an hour had passed. No attempt to get out of the car, no movement toward the store, nothing. Just the engine running and that still presence. It didn't look like someone waiting for someone. It didn't look like someone resting. It was just someone watching, and slowly I started to feel like it wasn't just me looking out. Someone was looking in too. After a while, I started paying closer attention to the driver's behavior. At certain moments when I moved behind the counter, his silhouette seemed to shift slightly, like he was tracking my movements. It wasn't exaggerated, but it was noticeable enough to make me more alert. I tried testing it a few times, walking from one side to the other, pretending to organize things, and every time I changed position, it seemed like he adjusted slightly in the car as well. That made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't ignore. I thought about going outside to ask if everything was okay, but the idea of approaching that car didn't feel right. There was nothing that justified me leaving the store at that moment. So I stayed inside watching from a distance, trying to understand what that person wanted. Time kept passing and the car stayed in the same spot. It had probably been close to an hour since he arrived, and the longer it went on, the more it felt like this wasn't a normal stop. Then another car pulled into the lot. I heard it before I saw it and instinctively looked outside. It was a normal car, nothing unusual, and it went straight to one of the pumps. That gave me an immediate sense of relief, just from not being alone anymore. I quickly looked at the car that had been parked for so long, and that's when something changed. The driver's door opened, but the person didn't get out. The door stayed open, and he remained seated inside as if he had just created an opening but wasn't actually trying to leave the car. That was strange in a very specific way, because it felt intentional. He wasn't going to get gas. He wasn't coming into the store. He just opened the door and stayed there. I started watching even more closely, trying to understand what he was waiting for. My eyes kept shifting between the parked car and the customer who had just arrived. The customer got out normally, went to the pump and started fueling, apparently not noticing anything unusual. Meanwhile, the man in the other car remained exactly the same. Door open, body slightly leaning forward but not getting out. And what caught my attention the most was where he was looking. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the other customer, fixed, without looking away. That gave me a bad feeling immediately, because it seemed like he was evaluating something. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't distraction. It was too focused. I felt that internal alert rise again, like something could happen at any moment, but I didn't know what. I stood behind the counter, pretending to organize a few things, but completely focused on what was happening outside. The customer finished fueling and closed the tank, everything normal. He glanced around briefly, probably out of habit, but didn't seem to notice the other car. Meanwhile, the man remained in the same position, door open, not stepping out. It was starting to feel more and more intentional. Then the customer walked toward the store, and that was exactly when I saw the man lean a bit further out of the car, like he was trying to get a better view. He didn't get out, but he shifted enough to show he was paying even closer attention. My stomach tightened immediately because that didn't feel like a coincidence. It was like he was waiting for a specific person, or waiting for the right moment to do something. When the customer opened the store door and stepped inside, I heard the beep and automatically looked back at the parked car. The driver's door was still open and the man was still inside, but now he wasn't looking at the store anymore. He was looking to the side toward the entrance, like he was trying to hear or follow the movement of the person who had just gone in. That made me even more tense because it felt like he was tracking everything carefully without wanting to be noticed. The customer came up to the counter normally, asked for a few simple items, and started talking casually with me like anyone else would. I tried to respond normally, but my attention was split. Several times I glanced over his shoulder toward the parking lot, and the man was still there, not moving, not closing the door, just waiting. While I finished the customer's purchase, my mind wouldn't stop. I was trying to understand what exactly that man was waiting for, because up until that point, he had had several opportunities to get out of the car before the customer arrived, while he was fueling, while he was entering the store. But he did nothing. He just opened the door and watched. That started to feel less like hesitation and more like calculation. The customer took his things, thanked me, and left the store. I followed him with my eyes to the door, trying not to show any nervousness. As soon as he stepped outside, I immediately looked toward the parking lot. The man in the car had shifted again. Now he was leaning further out with part of his body extending through the open door, but he still hadn't stepped out. That gave me a very clear feeling that he was waiting for the customer to fully leave before making any move. The customer got into his car and started the engine, still unaware of anything unusual. I stared intently, almost holding my breath, trying to anticipate any movement from the other man. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The customer began slowly pulling out of the lot, and that was exactly when the man finally got out of his car. It was quick but not impulsive. He stepped out in a controlled movement, like he had already decided to do it beforehand. He stood next to the door for a moment, looking in the direction of the car that was leaving. I couldn't see his face clearly, just his posture. He didn't chase after it, didn't call out, didn't do anything immediate. He just watched as the other vehicle drove away, and that was what unsettled me the most, because it felt like he was confirming something. After the customer's car completely left the station area, the man remained standing for a few seconds, still looking toward the road. I stood motionless behind the counter, watching every movement, trying to understand what he would do next. Slowly, he turned his body toward the store. It wasn't quick or hesitant. It was calm, like he already knew exactly what he was going to do now that he was alone again. He took a few steps toward the entrance, still unhurried. My entire body went on alert at that moment. The feeling I had was very clear. He hadn't come in before because he wasn't alone enough, and now he was. I didn't know what he wanted, but I knew that behavior wasn't normal. I kept my hands near the phone behind the counter, ready to call if needed without taking my eyes off the door. When he got close to the entrance, he didn't go in immediately. He stopped outside right in front of the glass but didn't open the door. He stayed there for a few seconds, looking inside. This time, the lighting hit his face a little more, but still not enough to make out many details. Just that his expression was too neutral, almost empty. He didn't seem nervous. He didn't seem in a hurry, just focused. That gave me a bad feeling because it seemed like he was evaluating the situation before acting. I stood completely still behind the counter, trying not to show tension but ready for anything. The silence in that moment felt heavier than before. I could even hear the faint sound of his car engine still running outside. And then, after a few seconds that felt longer than they actually were, he took a step back. He didn't open the door. He didn't come in. He just slowly retreated. He stood there for another moment as if reconsidering, and then turned his body sideways and began walking back toward the car. It wasn't sudden, it was deliberate but calm. I followed him with my eyes still tense, trying to understand what had made him change his mind at that exact moment. He got back into the car, closed the door calmly, and stayed there for a few seconds with the engine still running. After that, he simply reversed, pulled out of the space, and drove away without any rush, disappearing down the road the same way he had arrived. I stood there behind the counter for a long time after he left, just trying to process everything. Because what stayed with me the most wasn't just the strange behavior. It was the way he seemed to be waiting for the right conditions, like he was calculating risk the entire time. And the only conclusion I could come to was that night, for some reason, he decided it wasn't the right moment yet. Story 6. I worked the overnight shift at a convenience store in rural Nevada, on a very isolated stretch of road where you can go long minutes without seeing another car. The store had an online order system for pickup, something simple, usually used by people passing through who just wanted to grab something quickly and continue their trip. During the night, almost no one used it, so when an order showed up at that hour, it was usually unusual. That night, I was alone as always, organizing a few things near the register when the system alerted me of a new order. I looked at the monitor and saw it was a small order, basic stuff, some snacks and a drink. Nothing unusual in itself, but the time caught my attention. It was around 2:40 a.m. Even so, I prepared the order normally, put everything in a bag and left it behind the counter as standard procedure. After that, I waited for someone to come in to pick it up, occasionally glancing at the parking lot, but I didn't see any car approaching at that moment. Minutes went by and no one showed up. I started to think maybe the person had canceled or given up, but the system didn't show any change. The order was still active, as if waiting to be picked up. I looked outside through the glass door a few times, but the lit area was completely empty. No cars at the pumps, no movement. Just the white station lights reflecting on the ground and darkness beyond. Then the store phone rang. That immediately caught my attention because it wasn't common for someone to call at that hour. I answered almost automatically, saying the store name. On the other end, there was a male voice. Low unhurried. He asked only one thing. Is the order ready? I replied that yes, it was already prepared. There was a brief silence and then the call disconnected. No goodbye, nothing else. I stood there holding the phone for a few seconds after the call ended, trying to process it. It wasn't a strange question on its own, but the way it was asked, and the fact that he hung up immediately without confirming anything, gave me a bad feeling. I looked outside again, expecting to see a car approaching now that the order was confirmed, but the lit area was still empty. Then I looked farther out, trying to see beyond the station lights, and that's when I saw it. A car parked farther away, outside the direct reach of the light. I hadn't noticed it before, maybe because it was completely in the shadows. You could only see the outline, a dark shape against the lighter ground. That immediately made me more alert, because it felt like someone had been there the whole time, just outside the visible area. I stared in that direction for a few seconds, trying to confirm if it was really a car or just an illusion from the lighting. But it wasn't. As I focused harder, I could make out the shape better, the roof, the slightly angled front, and there was someone inside. I couldn't see their face, but I could tell there was a presence in the driver's seat. That gave me a strange feeling, because it seemed like the person had been sitting there for a while, watching without approaching. I looked back at the counter, at the prepared order, then at the entrance. Everything was quiet, no sign that anyone was coming to pick it up. And still, the car remained there outside the light. That started to bother me more because it didn't feel like someone waiting in a normal way. It felt like they were avoiding being fully seen. I started wondering if it was connected to the call I had just answered, and that thought didn't sit well with me. I stayed there, trying to remain calm and act like it was just a strange situation. Nothing more. But the truth was, my attention was completely fixed on that car. I found myself constantly looking, trying to see if there was any movement, any sign that the person would finally get out and come into the store. But nothing happened. The car stayed still, and that made me more tense with each passing minute. After a while, I checked the clock and realized it had been more than 10 minutes since the call. That didn't make sense. If the person wanted the order, they would have come to get it by now. And if they didn't, why were they still there? I thought about canceling the order in the system and continuing with my closing routine, but something told me not to do that yet. It felt like it wasn't over, that something was still going to happen. Since my shift was nearing its end, I started doing some closing tasks. One of the things I always did was turn off part of the store's interior lights, leaving only the register area well lit. It was standard procedure. But that night, as I walked to turn off some lights, I felt a strange discomfort, like it would change something outside. Even so, I continued. I turned off the first row of lights and the store got a bit darker. As soon as I did that, I instinctively looked outside, and that's when I saw the movement. The car that had been parked in the distance and started moving, slowly, very slowly, toward the store. At that moment, my whole body went on alert. It wasn't just a strange situation anymore. It was reacting to what I was doing inside. I stood there for a second, staring as the car slowly advanced, still not fully entering the lit area. Its headlights were off, just the movement, almost silent. That gave me a very bad feeling, because it seemed like the person was trying to approach without drawing attention. My first instinct was not to turn off any more lights. Instead, I went back and turned everything on again, making the store fully illuminated. As soon as I did that, I looked outside again, and the car stopped. It became still again, still outside the direct reach of the light. That made my stomach tighten in a way I couldn't ignore, because now it felt too clear that it wasn't a coincidence. I stood there for a few seconds looking outside, trying to figure out what to do. My breathing had already sped up, and I started thinking of all possibilities at once. Part of me wanted to ignore it and just wait for the shift to end, but another part knew this wasn't normal. I looked at the phone, considering calling the police, but I was still hesitating, unsure how to explain it. Even so, I decided to test it one more time. I slowly walked to the switch and turned off part of the lights again. As the store dimmed slightly, I looked outside, and just like before, the car started moving again, slowly, toward the entrance. No headlights, no rush, as if it was waiting exactly for that. At that moment, I had no doubt anymore. That wasn't someone just waiting for an order. It was someone waiting for the store to become more vulnerable. I felt a cold chill run through my body, and this time I didn't hesitate. I went straight to the phone and called the police, trying to speak clearly even though my voice was slightly shaking. Meanwhile, I kept all the lights on and stayed behind the counter, not taking my eyes off the door. While I was on the call, I looked outside again, and the car had stopped once more. It stayed there at the edge of the light like before. It didn't move forward. It didn't back away. It just stayed, as if waiting for something else to happen. I stayed on the line until the police arrived. They searched the area, but by the time they got there, the car was gone, and the order was never picked up. After that night, I never treated that kind of order the same way again, because it became very clear to me that it wasn't about buying something, it was about waiting for the right moment. Story 7. I worked the overnight shift at a gas station off US 285 in rural New Mexico, about 40 minutes from the nearest town. I'm 27 years old, and I took this job because it paid a little better to cover the bad hours and because, honestly, almost no one shows up during the night. The store is small, just a counter area, a few shelves with snacks, a coffee machine that constantly makes strange noises, and an old freezer that vibrates all the time. Outside there are 4 pumps, all set a bit away from the road with that harsh white lighting that doesn't quite reach the edge of the lot. After midnight, traffic basically disappears. All that's left is the sound of insects hitting the lights and the wind moving through the desert, sometimes kicking up dust that taps against the windows like someone lightly scratching. On that particular night, I was alone as usual, around 2:10 in the morning. I remember the time because I had just checked my phone, kind of bored, waiting for time to pass. I had done a partial cash register closeout, cleaned the counter, and was leaning behind the register watching the security cameras, more out of habit than concern. The footage shows on a small monitor, split into 4 sections showing the pumps and the front of the store. Everything looked normal, completely empty. No cars, no distant lights coming from the road. Just that still, almost lifeless scene. That's when a car suddenly appeared, slowly pulling into the lot without high beams, almost like it didn't want to draw attention. The car stopped at the farthest pump from the store, number 4, which also has the weakest lighting. It was a dark sedan, hard to identify the exact color because of the poor lighting, maybe blue or black. I kept watching through the camera as the driver got out. It looked like a guy alone wearing a hoodie, even though it wasn't that cold that night. That caught my attention a bit because at that hour, people who stop usually come inside, buy coffee, use the bathroom. This guy did none of that. He just stood there, fueling in silence, head down. No unnecessary movement, didn't even look toward the store. I watched longer than usual, trying to figure out if something was off or if it was just my impression. After about 2 or 3 minutes, he finished fueling, got back in the car, and left without even coming to the register. I found it odd, but not completely unusual. Sometimes people pay directly at the pump with a card and leave. What was really strange happened right after. As soon as the car left the lot and disappeared down the road, the register printer started making that loud, dry noise, like when an automatic receipt prints. I hadn't processed any sale at that moment. I walked over to the machine and pulled the paper, already a bit confused. It was a payment receipt from one of the pumps, but not pump 4. It was from pump 2, and the time showed a few minutes before that car had arrived. I stared at it for a few seconds, trying to understand if the system had glitched or delayed the print. At first, I thought it might just be a system delay, since that register had issues before. Even so, it didn't make much sense. I had been watching the cameras for a while before the car arrived, and I hadn't seen anyone using pump 2. No car, no movement, nothing. It would have been impossible for me not to notice because any light in the lot catches attention immediately. I stood there holding the receipt, looking at the time again, checking my phone clock, trying to fit it into some logical explanation. The only thing I thought was that maybe someone had come and gone really fast and I just didn't see it. But it didn't add up. There was no sound of a car arriving or leaving. So I went straight to the camera monitor to check. I rewound the footage a few minutes before the time on the receipt and started watching more carefully. At first it looked just like I remembered. Everything empty, the lot completely still. Just the wind moving a bit of dust in the corner of the screen. But after a few seconds I started noticing a detail I hadn't caught before. On the camera for pump 2 in the background, right where the light doesn't fully reach, something looked different. It wasn't a clearly visible car. It was more like a dark shape, stationary, just outside the direct light. I leaned closer to the screen, trying to understand what I was seeing because it didn't look exactly empty like I remembered. I spent a few seconds staring at it, trying to convince myself it was just a shadow or some camera effect. But the more I paid attention, the more it seemed like something was actually there, standing still. There was no clear shape, no face, nothing like that. But it also didn't look like something natural, like a pole or a fixed object. It was like someone standing right at the edge of the light, where the image starts to get grainy. I started to feel that automatic discomfort in my chest, like when you realize something's wrong but don't know what yet. Even so, I kept watching, trying to find a moment when it appeared or moved away. That's when I saw the movement. It wasn't fast or obvious, it was slow. So slow that if I hadn't been looking directly, I probably wouldn't have noticed. That dark shape seemed to shift slightly, like it took a small step forward, entering a bit more into the light, but still not enough to see clearly. I felt a chill immediately, because it was clear it wasn't an object. It was someone, and the worst part was realizing it had been there before the car arrived, before anything else happened that night. As if the person had already been standing there in the dark, waiting, for no apparent reason. I rewound the footage again to make sure I wasn't imagining things. I kept going back and forth trying to catch the exact moment it appeared, but there wasn't one. It was just already there. At no point could I see someone walking up or a car pulling in at that pump earlier. That figure was just there, almost motionless, like it had been outside my field of attention the entire time. That started to make me uneasy in a way I couldn't explain. I automatically looked out the store window straight toward pump 2, but from my position I couldn't clearly see that darker area. All I could see was the lit concrete and empty space around it. I tried to rationalize it. I thought maybe it was someone who had walked along the road, which would already be strange because there's nothing nearby. But still the only explanation that made some sense. Maybe the person was waiting for someone or didn't have a car, I don't know. But that didn't explain the receipt. If someone had used pump 2, the system would have recorded it at the correct time, and I would have seen movement. None of that happened. And the more I thought about it, the more I had that bad feeling like there was someone out there I hadn't properly seen, but who had already seen me. That's when I heard a faint sound coming from the front door of the store. It wasn't a loud knock or anything like that. It was like the sound of the handle being tested very slowly, like someone was trying to open it without making noise. My body froze immediately. I stared straight at the door, not making a sound, trying to hear it again. The noise stopped for a few seconds, and I thought maybe it had been my imagination, some creak in the wood or something. But then it happened again, exactly the same. A light movement on the handle, very slow, like someone outside was trying to turn it without drawing attention. My heart started beating faster right away. The door was locked, as always during the night shift, so it didn't open. But that wasn't someone just passing by or bumping into it by accident. It was someone trying to get in. I moved slightly closer to the counter, still staring at the door, trying to see a shadow through the glass, but the interior lighting reflected too much so I could barely see anything outside. I felt that cold drop in my stomach, the kind of feeling that comes before you realize things might get out of control. My first thought was that it might be the guy who had fueled at pump 4. Maybe he came back for some reason. But that didn't make sense. He had left, and besides, the timing didn't match. That thing on the camera had already been there before he arrived. I stood there for a few seconds, not knowing what to do. My mind was trying to build some logical explanation, anything, but nothing fit. I glanced quickly at the camera monitor again, trying to see if someone appeared in front of the store. On the outside camera, I could only see the door area, somewhat blown out by the light. No one was visible. That made me even more uncomfortable because the sound on the handle had been very clear. I hadn't imagined it. I kept shifting my gaze between the door and the monitor, trying to catch any movement, any sign that someone was actually there. Then I heard a light scratching sound on the glass, very faint, like a fingernail slowly dragging across it. I froze again. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a branch. There was nothing there that could make that kind of sound. It was too specific. I took a step back without even realizing it and felt the pressure in my chest increase. My breathing got shorter, and I started thinking about calling the police, even without fully understanding what was happening. But before grabbing the phone, I looked back at the monitor, and on the camera for Pump 2, that same dark area was no longer empty.
Thank you very much for your company until the end. Your support is what gives life to this channel. If these stories have caught you, don't forget to leave your like and comment on your opinion. And if you are not yet part of our community, sign up now to receive the next real horror stories.